Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello and good morning and welcome back to the Compassion Project. My name is Dr. Danielle Lord. I am the hostess of the show and I am alone today. I don't have any guests. And so I wanted to take this time to talk a little bit more, unpack, explore, and examine what I mean by institutional trauma. So just a quick note of thanks to the USA Global TV and Radio Network, and happy to be with you here again today. So, all right, before we get started, I just want to provide you with an opportunity to think about a couple of things that you may be noticing or experiencing. So over the past couple of years, how many of you have noticed, let me advance my slides here. This is a little new thing for me. No guests, but slides today. So over the past couple of years, how many of you have noticed or experienced acts of aggression or increasing acts of aggression, vitriolic responses from people that maybe you just accidentally bumped into, road rage? I know I can't stand driving anymore. Being out on the freeway, it almost feels like taking your life in your hands. There's so much road rage with people just whipping in and out of lanes, running right through red lights and stop signs. So it's getting a little frightening out there. Public instances of mental health decline. What I mean by that is I have seen a remarkable increase in the amount of individuals just walking down the street, having full conversations with someone that apparently is there in their own mind. And it's very sad and very disheartening to see how much mental health is around us in the public spaces. Increasing amounts of depression or anxiety among family or friends, an increasing sense of frustration, apathy, loneliness or shortness, and just a lack of compassion, empathy, and respect and grace overall. So as we kind of dive into the topic today, these are some of the things I'd ask you to reflect on as we unpack what I mean by institutional trauma. So who am I? Just a little bit of background. Now, I've had 5 or 6 shows on with the Compassion Project here on USA Global TV. And I thought it was time to spend a little bit more time talking about this, but I also wanted to kind of reintroduce myself. So I have a 32-year career background in the field of organizational development. And so what I do is I don't organize things. That's usually the first place people go to is, oh, great, I need organizing. I work with organizations, usually at the corporate level in my private practice with smaller organizations, helping them build a successful organization. And that's through structure, that's through change management, that's through learning opportunities, and mostly leadership development. Really what I like to think of myself is bringing kindness to business. And we're in this weird space where somehow kindness and business can't seem to coexist. And I don't know where and that trend started, if that's a holdover from the industrial era. But I like to dispel that myth that we can be in business and we can be kind. And in fact, we actually have better outcomes when we are kind and in business together. So with that, I'm going to start by defining trauma. I know that the psychological community might not agree with this particular definition. I pulled this from, I think it was Webster's. Sorry, I did not cite my source here. But I found this to be very, very interesting. And trauma is defined in the online Webster's dictionary as the experience of a stressful, frightening, or distressing events that are difficult to cope with or are outside our own span of control. Now, what I thought was interesting around this is this idea of chronic. So we tend to think oftentimes of trauma as being a significant event. It was a bad car accident, and we were caught in a fire. We were significantly injured. And so that's generally our kind of societal understanding of trauma. I'm trying to adjust my phone volume here, which I should have done ahead of the show. But actually, this idea of chronic trauma, which is repeated and prolonged, I think is what we're experiencing societally. And so that's what I mean when I talk about institutional trauma. And I'll unpack some of those things as we go through the program today. But it's also complex trauma, which is exposure to varied and multiple events that are often invasive or of an interpersonal nature. So those are those types of things that are interpersonal, meaning that they are direct personal attacks on us. So say, for example, I accidentally run into someone in the grocery store and maybe brush up against them. And the response to my, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, isn't a, oh, no worries at all, or no problem, or it's all right, is met with what I mentioned earlier, kind of a vitriolic response of a very dirty look, a very mean comment back. I was once told that someone hoped I died on the way home because I inadvertently hit them with my cart in the grocery store. So that's the type of interpersonal nature that we folks are exposed to on a regular basis. And it's not getting better. I think it's actually getting worse. And in fact, some folks are struggling with all three. Okay, there was that extra one. Okay, so we are experiencing a litany of hostilities, and it's all around us and it's everywhere. So at the macro level, or what we kind of think about in being that holistic space, we are swimming in kind of this just murky swamp of yuckiness that's all around us. Like I said, the road rage that we're experiencing, the vitriolic responses, the incidence of extreme mental health issues within our community at large. Those are things that energetically kind of take a lot out of us to see and deal with on a regular basis. There's also this global trauma that we were all exposed to called COVID. And I think that we are still experiencing a lot of the ramifications of that. And I'll touch a little bit more on that in a few minutes. Toxic workplace culture. Our employee engagement scores are down to 39%. That means, and that's just statistically speaking, but that means that only 39% of your employees in your organizations are engaged in the workplace. So we are seeing a lot of trauma at work, and I spend a lot of time talking about this because it has such impacts on us. Again, that's an interpersonal attack that comes at us all the time when we're told we're not good enough, our voice isn't respected, our ideas, our professional experience isn't considered. So we take that trauma and we're exposed to it every single day. We take it home and we bring that trauma into the house, and it affects our loved ones, our kids, and then those individuals take that trauma back out into the larger society. We are also seeing a significant uptick in family or familial estrangements. We have an entire generation who somehow doesn't want to be involved with their families any longer. And that is actually being perpetuated in the mental health community when we have mental health counselors telling 20 and 30-year-olds, even I had a 50-year-old friend who's 50 years old, tell me that she was seeing a mental health counselor who was telling her, you should just walk away from your entire family. They don't deserve you. They've done you wrong. Maybe one or two misgivings, and somehow you just need to walk away and remove yourself from the family. So we're seeing this happen a lot with kind of the 20 to 30-year-old age range. And we've got hospital violence is up by 60% in the emergency rooms. And I imagine that violence through just the feelings of disrespect and the low engagement with that degree of workplace violence does follow through within our organizations as well. So when I talk about this macro environment, those are things that are happening all around us. Then we take trauma to the micro level, or kind of what I call these tiny hostilities. And that's really like akin to death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's just coming at us all the time and we cannot get away from it. So when I talk about the repeated and prolonged sense of small incidents, that's exactly what I'm referring to. But we are going through a lot of emotional and mental trauma, as I mentioned, at work. Think about the average day. Now, I think alarm clocks have come a long ways with the using our phones as our alarm clocks, but think about the alarm clock that we were using 20, 30 years ago with that blaring siren-like sound. We used to wake up to that. That's how we used to start our day. I mean, so we started our day in this heightened sense of rush of neurochemicals, sometimes not always healthy when we woke up to that. So oftentimes there's small and unseen incidents of tiny hostilities, and they can be slow and insidious as well. And so we are living truly in an environment of chronic and prolonged trauma. All right, so this is a messy slide. It's hectic and it's very hard to see. But what I wanted to highlight here were all of the different incidents of anxiety and depression, as well as substance use and suicidal ideation. And all of this has occurred since COVID and the COVID safety measures that occurred. So that's 14 specific references to anxiety and depression, and 9 related just to substance abuse and suicidal ideation. So these are reports that are coming out right now. So we can definitely see the increase in how people are responding to the trauma that's all around us. All right, with that, I want to begin to take a look, if I can get some tech cooperation. Okay, here we go. So when I talk about institutional trauma and those small little insidious things that are coming at us, I just want to highlight some examples of things that we experience again in the macro environment. So this is architecture that was commonplace 100 years ago. We saw these beautiful ornate buildings that were just beautifully artistic in nature. And you just get a sense of awe and appreciation when you see this. And you can't help but smile. This particular building here on the right, I think your right, my left, my right, your left, with the cat on it. This actually was a building that was in Riga, Latvia when I was there in 1991, then part of the Soviet Union. But just this architecture was so lovely and beautiful. And now we have this. We have these cold, concrete structures that are rough edges, and there's nothing appealing or beautiful about this. This is how the architecture shifted after World War II. So about the 1950s, 1960s, and the whole idea around it was that, we're going to modernize all these buildings. This old architecture with these beautiful spirals and finials and peaks was too expensive. We need to rebuild quickly. And so we're going to move into kind of this modern era of architecture. This style of architecture has a name, and it is actually called brutalism. Yes, brutalism is the name of this architectural style. So knowing the name of this and just the feel that you get when you look at this, I can't help but think this is part of that institutional trauma that is causing all of us to experience some negativity. There was a really interesting show that was on a couple months ago, a YouTube show where the gal talked about how art is designed to evoke an emotion in us. And architecture is a form of art. And so how can we not feel when we see these bland, cold, structured buildings? This next slide is actually me in the Soviet Union. This is such a classic example. This right here, lower left-hand corner on my left, was our dorm. And I can tell you the sense of walking around the corner and coming home to that was not uplifting at all. And pretty much everyone in the Soviet Union at that time lived in a building that looked something similar to that. And in a gray day, or on a gray day rather, it was not appealing or uplifting at all. Just a couple other photos that are kind of fun. This was the pipe work that was in the exterior wall. So there were no interior sections of the walls like we have here in our modern homes where the pipes would be hidden. This was actually the hot water pipe, or actually it was the water pipe. But that's how we knew. That right there is a little cockroach. I know some of these are hard to see. That's a cockroach. And that's how we knew if we had hot water for the day. This is a giant end of a nail sticking through the concrete. And so it's just one more example of how actually depressing and kind of that sense of interpersonal trauma or interpersonal attack can feel just in the environment that we live in. All right, moving on. Trains, planes, and automobiles. I thought this was another great example of how we have taken this form of beauty and kind of really bastardized it to be something that is not lovely and aesthetically appealing any longer. Now, you can make the argument that in this example of a train, again, might be hard to see, but it's beautifully appointed with these lovely window dressings and soft furnishings. You might make the argument that that was only for the wealthy who could afford it, but even so, it's diminishing the existence of our aesthetic. And now we've gone to this gray, dull, lifeless. This is a train. And this was a supposed 2024 upgrade that they did on the train with these lifeless gray seats in this kind of very stale, drab environment. This photo here, again, probably hard to see, but this is a side view or profile view of airline seats today. And just look at how tiny that is. We have to all squeeze in there and sit there for long durations of time. And then just the interior of a car as well. We've just moved from this aesthetically appeasing environment, and it's everywhere when we begin to think about it. All right, okay, even appliances aren't immune. This is a waffle maker from the 1910s. Look at that, it's lovely. And it came on this beautiful silver tray, and it had a syrup pitcher and a bowl that went with it. So even the appliances 100 years ago were really quite lovely compared to this kind of industrial feel that we see here. So it is all around us. Okay, so that's aesthetically. Now let's shift a little bit and talk about what is happening to us internally as well. So what happened to the bells? All the bells, I can't speak for here in the United States, but I know that after World War II, all of the bells in Europe were removed, or most of them. And the theory behind this is that they had a frequency that was healing. And so when we heard the bells ring, it actually helped create a sense of stability, calmness, happiness, positive emotions. And so the bells have been removed. We no longer have bells. And in fact, the frequency of music was changed in or around the same time frame from a 432 hertz to I think it's 440 or 450, which is actually very discordant and does cellular damage to the body. So if you question that, you can take a look at the work by Dr. Emoto from Japan. He did quite a bit of work looking at the water molecules, or actually water droplets, and what happened to the water when the water droplets were exposed to discordant frequencies or harmonious frequencies. And so the water droplets exposed to discordant or even negative words took on these really awful shapes compared to the water droplets that were exposed to healing frequencies or helpful, kind words. So if our bodies are made of what I hear anywhere from 78 to 90% water, you can only imagine how those discordant frequencies are affecting our bodies overall. Another great example is to look at what happens to sand. You can take a pile of sand and put it on a table and then expose the sand to different frequencies, and it will do something similar to what the water is doing. It will actually reform into different shapes. That is all as a result of the frequencies that the sand is being exposed to. So. And then we have the words of work, or the words of business, or the words even within our communities at large. There's violence in our words as well. I heard someone say the other day, I'm going to shoot you a text message. We have pain points. We have strategic execution at work. We have bullet points on our PowerPoints. We need to pull the trigger on something. So there's even violence that exists within our words. And again, if reflecting back to Dr. Emoto's work, if we know that water responds to even some of these negative words, how is that impacting our body overall? All right, so institutional trauma, as I'm defining it, complex trauma, exposure to varied and multiple events, often invasive or interpersonal. Those impact our relationships, our social aspect, our personal well-being, and our ability to be interactive in a positive and meaningful way. And we certainly see this in organizations today that are really struggling with toxic culture, ineffective leadership, and low engagement. And again, we know that those things have an impact on us that we bring home, and then our family members bring that back into the community. So what happens to us physically, because I've talked about the physical aspects of this, we have a physiological or psychological, I think I have I guess that's right, psychological responses, and what's called the amygdala hijack. So what happens when we go into states of stress is that we make decisions from the hippocampus, which is, it's the amygdala, sorry, the hippocampus is long-term memory. We have an amygdala response. And so we will make decisions based on our emotions or our emotional responses or our emotional memory. And so we move into the state of fight or flight, where we're no longer making decisions from our frontal cortex, which is our executive center. So we're making really rash emotional-based responses. We also then, our personality flips into what's called the shadow side, and that is almost the exact opposite of who we are. So generally on a good day or a regular day, a great day, fine day, I'm a pretty outgoing, happy, generally positive person. But when I get into a state of stress, I go into my shadow side and I tend to be very quiet. I tend to be a little morose. I tend to shut down and not want to engage in someone. So when we're in this state collectively of trauma, everyone is functioning from that shadow side, and we're generally not at our best. Neurological, what happens to us in this constant state of stress, we have neurotransmitters and neurocircuitry reallocation. And I think this is what has happened to an entire generation of kids and the response to COVID. And so hopefully I can get to that today in this. But what happens is then we have what's called a production of bilirubin oxidative metabolites. And that's a stress response that has long-term physical responses to the production of that bilirubin, which then we have immune responses. So we have blood pressure issues. That bilirubin oxidative metabolites increases our cortisol, which is a known stress response. So we get big tummies as a result. So we tend to put on weight. And then sociological, what we are all experiencing is this idea of mirroring, neurological mirroring. That was work done by Boyatzis and Goldman, I think in the early 2000s. But when we're exposed to this behavior, this negative behavior that we're all exposed to on this fairly regular basis, is we all begin to mimic that behavior. Because from our neurological mirroring, we mimic behavior we're exposed to over time. So when we think about the organization and the business, and we have these leaders who are paid a lot of money to not be leading very effectively, and we're seeing that bad behavior rewarded, we likewise will begin to behave in that same manner. All right. So I think this is the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. And I think what happens when we get into this state of constant stress, constant frustration, those trauma responses, we end up spending a lot of time in this space down here at the lower level of this graph, and that is referred to as bargaining. And so we are constantly in this mindset of, I just have to get through this. It'll be better tomorrow if I can get through this one more day. And so we're constantly making kind of, I don't want to say excuses, but we're constantly making excuses that it's going to be okay and we're going to get through this if we just get through today. Another way to look at this, sorry about this. Whoops. Another way to look at this is that we're constantly in what Dr. William Bridges referred to as the neutral zone. And so in the neutral zone, there is a lot of confusion, disorientation, frustration, and we tend to become very apathetic. Again, going back to that bargaining behavior. I'll just get through today. It'll be okay. And so I think that from the space of trauma, we're kind of in this collectively in this neutral zone. Just about the time we start to feel like we're digging out and getting over to this happy place of new beginnings with a little sunshine here, something happens that is trauma related, again, from the macro or micro environment, and we get pushed back down into that neutral zone, and the cycle just continues. So there we go. Okay, so the reality, we are swimming in a swamp of depravity and apathy, which is really pretty sad to think about. So this is what I mean by saying we have to understand what's coming at us in all different directions. It's all around us before we can ignite this idea of a compassion evolution, which is really what I'm hoping to do with the Compassion Project, is to bring us lift the veil of what's going on. We have to understand it first before we can begin to make changes. So when we think about all of those things, like the mirroring neurons, we get sucked into that negative behavior and we just repeat the cycle over and over. And I think energetically as well, we have the capacity to sense when something is not going right? I think just stop and reflect for a minute. If you walk into a room, we generally can feel and pick up on that tension or that sense of just yuck. And we know that something isn't right. And so energetically then, it's very easy to become in that same state of apathy or complacency, if you will. So the only way to shift all of this kind of reality that we're living in is to recognize it so that we can then begin to move on from it. Okay, so we can do better. I really, truly believe this. My goal is really to bring compassion, empathy, kindness, heart, and so much more into the workplace and into the world at large. So my work, the work that I do in organizational development, is really focused on the organizations. And I'm so grateful to the opportunity with USA Global TV and radio, because now I have this bigger platform in which I can share this work so that we can make a shift, conscientiously, small, maybe even worldwide. So there we go. My BHAG. If you're familiar, if you've been in business and you're familiar with BHAG, you know what that is. If not, that is a big, hairy, lofty. No, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal. A big, hairy, audacious goal. So because we can do better. We can overcome this if we all work together. So what is it that we need to do? We need to recognize that we're in this reality of kind of institutional trauma. And I think most importantly, we need to allow ourselves to have grace and space for us. And that's what I always ask my guests: what can we do to have self-compassion for ourselves? It's different than self-care. So we have to take care of ourselves first. It's a bit like putting on the oxygen mask first and when you're in the airplane. So business leaders, please pay attention to your team members, be in relationship with them. They need a safe, beautiful, harmonious place to come to work, and that it will do so much for our communities at large. So really do commit to creating a culture of commitment within your organization. And I say, instead of being the chief oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm chief executive officer. That just flew right out of my head. I commit to becoming the chief engagement officer and really engage with everyone every day in a really meaningful way. And I think this extends outside of the workplace. We can do this in the grocery store. And I hate going to the grocery store. I have my own trauma from that being my first job. But we can extend this grace and space, and we can extend this ability to engage with everyone, regardless of where we are. In healthcare, I talk a lot about healthcare. I have a lot of other healthcare professionals on because I do see this as being a huge extension into the work of healthcare. We are all going to be, we either are or going to be patients at some point. So we've got to really pay good attention to our healthcare employees as well. Ultimately, our employees, if you think about this again from the work perspective, it is up to us to create the space where every employee feels valued, heard, motivated. And it really comes down to one simple thing. And again, this extends into every interaction that we all have, is that we can have quality daily human interactions with one another. And so that's all I'm asking for in the Compassion Project, so that we can, again, ignite that compassion evolution. So I've had a lot of people ask me, why do you say compassion evolution? And I say compassion evolution because a revolution is fast, it has a bright burning flame, and it can sometimes burn out pretty quickly. But an evolution starts small and catches on over time and is oftentimes much more sustainable long term. All right, so just one more slide on the workplace. And I think this is really interesting. Most employers do not know about this. This is work that was done by Cuddy, Fisk, and Glick back in 2013. Again, hard to see the graph here, I know, but their whole point of the work that they did was that if our employers, our leaders, and that's any one of us at any given time, are not demonstrating warmth, as shown here on the vertical graph line, we tend to fall into that place of complacency, and we actually begin to create passive or even active harm within the organization. So if you're a business leader and you're listening to this, it is likely that you have folks who are acting in that state of complacency. We call it quiet quitting today. I don't think that word does justice for what's actually happening. But this idea that our team members can't actually be actively engaging and harming your business at the extreme end, if not just, again, engaging in those little microaggressions, tiny hostilities towards other team members. So I get a lot of pushback on this because I have a lot of business leaders who say, oh, our team would never do that. We have great employees. But I have sat through many investigations where there was a lot of damage that was done because someone just did not care, or they actually wanted to even get back at someone within the organization for how they were treated. So I have quite a bit more slides that I'm probably not going to be able to get through today. So hopefully we can come back and spend a little bit more time talking about some of the solutions, because I do want to present solutions, and hopefully many of my guests will present solutions as well. And I didn't even get to talk about the 20-somethings. But the best part about this, in terms of creating space of compassion for ourselves and for others, it's absolutely free. And for our business leaders, engagement, compassion, kindness is not a party that happens within your organization. It's those high quality daily interactions, and those are free. Love, grace, space, kindness, all those things that you can do don't cost anything, but for you to give up just a little bit of your time and a little bit of your heart so that others can feel better about themselves. All right, I'm going to call it there for today. That was a lot to get through. I know the slides were probably tiny and hard to see, but I hope this gave you some sense about what it is that I mean when I talk about institutional trauma and igniting a compassion evolution. And there's so much more that we can do, and so many more conversations that we can have around this so that we can all experience better, happy, quality lives and not live in this yuckiness, this sea of complacency that we're all experiencing. Thank you for being with me today. I'm looking forward to being back in a couple more weeks. I have some great guests lined up for the next few months. So excited to continue with these conversations, and hopefully we'll do another solo show where I can continue to talk a little bit about this work. Thanks for being with me. Thank you to the producer, Dr. Jacqueline, and thank you to USA Global TV and Radio. Don't forget to click on the like button. I don't like to say smash the like button. That's not nice words. Click on the like button, follow the show, subscribe, and please leave comments. I'd love to know your thoughts on all of this, and I certainly will respond. So until next time, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful holiday. It is close to Thanksgiving here. I know that people might be listening at another point in time, but right now it's almost Thanksgiving time. So do enjoy the holiday, and I'll see you next time. And stay around to listen to our sponsors for just a few more minutes.